beloved Sojourners. Welcome to the Sojourners Roundtable, where we help you navigate the awakening journey with integrative spiritual life wisdom and practices through engaging conversations with other spiritual sojourners along the way. I'm Brian, and this week's episode, in that we explore the question, are you a spiritual sojourner? But before we jump into this week's conversation, my friends, I want you to meet two beloved sojourners here on our team, Brittany and Sandy.
Hello.
Hey.
Awesome. They're excited to be with us on the journey here in our first episode out the gate with this kind of spiritual roundtable conversational fit and feel where we surface questions that you normally are bringing to the table for us to explore on the spiritual life horizon. So let's jump right in. Let's begin with some reflection together today. And I think it's only fitting as we're in episode 1, if you will, just really from a personal standpoint, what does spiritual sojourners mean to you, to us? And perhaps more importantly, why are you involved in helping produce this resource and helping build this online community that we have going already? So I don't know who wants to jump in first as we have this conversation.
Okay, you're looking at me.
I'm looking at you. We got to start somewhere. So,
all right. What does spiritual sojourners mean to me? So for me, being a sojourner, I guess I feel like I've been a spiritual sojourner forever. Like many people, I was born into a faith community. I was raised in the Catholic Church. As a young person, struggling to figure out what am I hearing? What does this mean to me? How does this help me decide what my decisions are in life? And when I was older, I was looking for a more direct connection with God, to put that, I guess that's what it is. And so I went to a Protestant tradition, and in my thought process, I'm like, well, at least confession, you get rid of the human. And I guess I felt like that was a more direct communication with God. But then over time, I still felt like I was in what I would call the religious box. I just went from one box to another, but it was still a box where there was still a set of doctrine, a set of rules, a set of things that I was struggling to fit into, to find my way through. And I heard things like, everyone's welcome here, everyone's loved here, you can ask us anything, and blah, blah, blah. And my perception of my feeling, I don't know if it was accurate or not, to be honest, was that I still had to fit in the box. Within these parameters, you can ask whatever questions you want, but you had to adopt a core set of beliefs first. Then once you agree to that, now you can ask questions, and my questions weren't in the box. They were out of the box. Who is God? Or is it God? I mean, for me, it just always has been. But I still wanted to ask the question, is there a divinity that resonates better with me? What is it? What does it look like? How does it speak to me? How does it dictate who I am? What is mine to do in the world is a phrase I walk with. What is mine to do? I feel like I have a purpose. For me, it's a God-given purpose, the reason for my existence, and I want to live into that. I want to fulfill whatever that is, and I feel like I've spent my life trying to figure that out through a lot of navigation. You ever see the thing, this is your plan and this is God's plan? Yes, I resonate with that image, that cartoon. Maybe you've seen it.
Lots of detours.
Lots of detours. Lots of detours. Good one. So why? So in our current state, we moved physically our home a few years ago, and we're challenged with not having a community. the gift of that is you get to create your community when you don't have family or built-in friends where you live. And I don't even know if I intentionally sought it, sought a community that wanted to be part of this conversation. And through very, I guess, divine intervention, ended up in conversation and with people surrounding us that were in the same place, that were asking the same questions or wanted a place to say, yeah, we literally have no rules, no doctrine, no nothing. It's just, how do you feel, and what do you think, and what's the truth, and who can we listen to that's, has a book out or has some teachings that we can resonate with, that can help us speak into who we are. Because what's mine to do isn't what's yours to do, isn't what's yours to do. It's all, there is no one answer. So to me, the why is to offer up to anyone in this situation that wants to be part of this conversation to just be here and say, we're here. Let's have the conversation. Let's figure out together what it is, and celebrate the joys and celebrate the detours and navigate the detours. And so
It's a messy journey.
it's a messy journey.
Such is life.
Such is life. You got to be willing to face some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So for you, to some degree, this journey, this spiritual sojourners community, is significantly different than the box that you refer to, having grown up and come along inside of a box that had its own beliefs, rules, how things were to play out.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like that. So God, whatever that is for everybody, for me, God feels comfortable for me, has many different love and forgiveness, and there are so many different personality characteristics, if you will, in God. And I feel like the boxes, we're trying to pick one. Oh, we'll be the judging God, and we'll be the judging box, or we'll be the loving box. Like, we'll be the. I want a community that encompasses all of that, because we see ourselves in all of that.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Of course. Brittany.
Okay, what is a spiritual sojourner? Very similar to Sandy. I feel like ever since a quite young age, I've always kind of had this searching feeling, this longing feeling. And it was, I think now looking back, I have the verbiage to say it was a spiritual searching that I had, or still have, continue to have. And I like to say that I was given Catholicism as a child. Like, that was what I was raised with. But my parents gave me a lot of freedom to make that, interpret that as I will, I guess. And I actually went through quite a few spiritual journeys, and I've been very fortunate in my life that my detours and such took me living in multiple countries to my life this far, and I got some very real life experiences and exposures to so many different types of religions and cultures, and what they perceive as God and what they call God, or what they don't, or the multiple gods that serve them on this path of life. And it made me realize that I guess very similar, I didn't have a box, I didn't have a frame that I was looking at my own spirituality with. And I just felt that lens. Every conversation I had, any question I asked, that lens just widened and widened and widened. And I realized that the scope of the questions I had were so much outside of the realm, as you were saying, that I originally had imagined. And I kept asking, and I eventually would find people, and not necessarily, I think at one point in younger years, I thought that there would be an answer, that there is, this is it. But the more that I'm finding others that are also spiritual sojourners, and that I'm finding along this path, I'm realizing that it isn't, and sounds so cliche, but it isn't about the destination. It is the journey itself. It's that evolution. It's that coming together, that asking, and questioning beliefs that I once held as truths, and letting that morph, letting that be malleable in my life. And I think, again, like I think I've always been a sojourner, and finding this community or helping create this community actually put verbiage to a lot of those feelings and emotions that I think I've had for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, a common thread that I guess as we're talking through, it feels like in one way or another we've all felt like misfits trying to be shoehorned into a system, whatever institutional system we come through. I think it's pretty irrelevant. And as I'll share in a minute, but that's getting ahead of myself, is I think our culture doesn't help us, and that being in the sense that often we are conditioned to think there's like one right way to believe or to approach a situation.
Right.
And I guess, Brittany, what I'm hearing in your travels really help blow open
Oh yeah.
that perspective to see different cultures, different backgrounds, and
Right.
how they bring expression to the spiritual journey. Not necessarily saying you have to subscribe to this particular belief system.
Right. It just a lot of beliefs that I held as truths were just really flipped on their heads.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
with hearing just even someone talking about something as simple as tea or making a food,
Interesting.
a particular dish, it just really whole different perspectives.
And I would imagine in so many cultures, just around food, it has a lot of spirituality to it.
Yes.
Just some of the ordinary, mundane things are infused, and I guess that's what I'm drawn to in some other cultures, is the integrated, holistic infusion of being on a journey versus the box, right? The place you go, and to sort of check in, so
Yep.
yeah, wow. Yeah, for me, as I wrestle with so contrasting, because I think for all of us in our own stories, and I won't go into my background as much, so because it's very, very similar in that I always, as far back as I can remember, I was coming along feeling every step of the way like a misfit, and constantly sort of questioning and challenging along the way. And in contrast, I feel like what the universe or the spirit's working in and through me, and I think in and through us collectively, and what we're inviting the community to be a part of, is this kind of open conversational journey with all its messiness, and I think of it sometimes like this. Imagine, if you will, before you took your incarnation, before you took your human birth, you had this last pivotal face-to-face conversation with Spirit. And Spirit said, there's going to be lots of challenges, there's going to be lots of obstacles on this human journey you're getting ready to encounter, but don't forget about who you are. And to help you remember that, I'm going to give you this perspective of the blue sky. Always come back to the blue sky. The blue sky is going to be that portal to remind you of your soul, your sacred essence, nature. Conversation ends, you take the human birth, and before you know it, you're on this conditioning journey. You're plopped and immersed into a very specific context, a culture, a family, or whatever that might look like. And due to our human conditioning and just the way that process goes, before we know it, we're lost in a false sense of self, a false sense of who we are, because from our earliest years we're brought up and conditioned to be comparing, constantly competing with each other. This unconditional love that we know in our soul all of a sudden gets clouded with conditional love. I'll love you if you do this, if you don't do that. And we learn very quickly to be constantly judging ourselves and judging others. And oh, do we love the labels, right? And we sort of, in a soft way, brought it up in the conversation today is, we're constantly evaluating, sometimes just unconsciously, we're labeling something as, well, this is good, that's bad, she's right, he's wrong. And this sense of who we are gets clouded over with physical characteristics. I am fat, I am thin, or mental characteristics, I'm smart, or I'm stupid. Then we attach emotional characteristics and labels to our sense of identity of I'm depressed, or I'm a happy type of person, right? Or even our social roles. I'm a spouse, I'm a parent, I'm an entrepreneur, and you name it. And with each labeled characteristic, with each of these, it represents an identity attachment. Our sense of who we are is propped up by these attachments, whether they be the physical characteristics, the mental, the emotional, our social roles out there. And imagine with every one of these attachments that we accumulate year after year after year, each one of those representing a cloud. And remember the reminder of Spirit before we took the incarnation, that we have this beautiful blue sky backdrop or perspective. But cloud, 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 labeled characteristic, identity attachment. Before long, all we see is what?
Clouds.
We've forgotten about the blue sky. We have
Right.
forgotten the portal to our soul. We've forgotten our essence nature that is so vital to our thriving through this journey of life. And that's sort of how it is. I think for most of us as humans, we spend an entire lifetime trapped in the clouds, trapped in this sort of masked illusion of who we are, without kind of reawakening or reminding ourselves of what's real, what's true, that blue sky reality of the journey
Right. It actually,
of our deeper purpose.
if I can interrupt really quick, it
Oh,
actually
please.
reminds me of, like, let's say it's a cloudy day and you're flying somewhere,
Yes.
and you get through the murkiness and the gray of the clouds, and then you come above the cloud line, and then it's almost a stark reminder that, oh, the sky's still blue and the sun's still shining.
Has
I
not
can't-
gone anywhere.
Right, it's not.
Right?
It's still there, as
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we think when it's cloudy or when the moon's out that the sun and that blue sky is gone.
Right.
It's not gone. It's just from that vantage point, we forget that it exists.
Exactly.
And there's been so many times where I've been in a rainy city and we get above that cloud line, and then it's a stark reminder. You get the suns in your eyes and you're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
The sky is this beautiful light blue and the sun is always shining.
Right.
It's always there, even if I can't see it from where I'm standing.
Well, and to play on that analogy then, when we're in those clouds, there's the turbulence, and
Right.
that as we're playing out this metaphor,
Yeah.
is certainly reminds us that when all we can see is clouds, when we're in the turbulence and the storms, life is regularly and consistently painful. We're constantly experiencing suffering, right? And again, with this analogy, when you break through those clouds and are reminded of the blue sky, that's, in a way, when we talk about the awakening journey, that is breaking through and seeing that blue sky again. That's never gone anywhere.
Right. It's not.
Right?
It's not.
It's never gone anywhere.
Not been there.
Right.
Or it's like when the break in the clouds and you get like that beautiful, like off in the distance, you
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
sunshine on that tree over there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for most of us, we're just sort of coasting through life, but it's in these moments where we experience profound suffering, where the pain's a little more palpably present, that it's almost like an alarm bell that goes off in our life. It's these critical crisis moments. We can either sort of, these are the moments where we ask the big questions, right? The primal existential questions. The kind of questions that we're going to be talking about as a community of, who am I really anyway? What's life about? Where am I heading? But it's in these palpably painful moments where the alarm bell goes off, and we have a choice. We can either awaken to the blue sky reality, or we can hit the snooze button again and just keep sleepwalking through life.
Right.
Pain after pain, suffering after suffering. It's almost in these crisis moments, that spirit voice that talked to us before we launched into the incarnation that said, don't forget about the blue sky. Don't forget about who you really are when life gets challenging and you face the obstacles and all you can see is the clouds. It's almost like in these crisis moments, there's that voice of spirit behind saying, hey, are you ready yet? Wake up. Remember the blue sky? And I think, and this is where I want to go now as I think about my own backstory and what brings me to be passionate about sort of being with you as a fellow spiritual sojourner is, in their own unique ways, is I read the sacred stories. Every spiritual teacher throughout all the ages has embodied this kind of spiritual sojourner wake-up call. And in fact, let's just look in through the lens of the Jesus story. What I love about different languages, talking about international travel, maybe you could speak into this a little bit, but like just in the sacred text of the Jesus narrative where we're reading in the Greek language, so often our English is handicapped. There's only one word to convey, for instance, seeing. Like, I see that camera, or I see that person. And that's the kind of word that we use all the time. But there's this beautiful Greek word that in the life of Jesus, he's constantly looking at somebody in the clouds, in the midst of suffering, really struggling in the mess of life. And with deep compassion, looking eye to eye, with this kind of penetrating gaze you can imagine, Jesus is saying in those moments, and he's using a very different word, very different than just seeing a particular object. It's a word that conveys, I see through the mess, and I see your beautiful spiritual essence. And he does that with such care and compassion. It's similar to the Sanskrit word from the yogic tradition that you're really familiar with. I think we all are at this point, of namaste, which is really conveying, I think, in its own way, if I'm not mistaken, that beneath the personality, beneath the bullshit, but beneath all the crap and messiness of life, I'm seeing your divine essence. I'm seeing the blue sky beneath the clouds.
So this actually reminds me, the song Amazing Grace. The first time I was introduced to the concept of grace within the yogic tradition, the song Amazing Grace was the first thing that came to my mind. And you talked about the word seeing. And I think the one line, and forgive me if I get this wrong, I once was lost, but now I see. I think that's the same kind of see that the song is talking about. It's not that like, oh, I'm lost and now I have visual sight. It's like, no, now I see, I understand, I've internalized, I conceptualize. There's so much more weight in that word, to see.
Right.
And in that song Amazing Grace, which ends up being a very common popular song to play at the end of one's life, you know, and once was blind, now I see. And I think it's around that same strand of thought of I'm encompassing all that either I am in this life, or that this life had to offer, or now I see this person as the spirit, or, you know, however that can be interpreted. But it's very much so along the strains of that much heavier word of see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Ram Dass tells a story in Becoming Nobody that I absolutely love, which is perfect. He goes, you know, we don't go into a forest. We go into a forest, we're like, what a beautiful pine tree, what a beautiful pinyon. We just look at all the beautiful trees, and they're all different, and we love that. And then we look at people, we're like, oh, well, I'd love him if only she did that, or he looked like that, or like,
Yes.
we looked at humans the same way without the...
We're not comparing and competing with trees.
Right.
They're just trees.
They're just trees.
But as soon as we're talking about human incarnation and people, it gets really messy really fast, right?
Right.
Exactly. And so it's out of these, to continue with sort of the Jesus movement as one example, paired with compassionately encountering people was sort of this invitation. What I now look at and see these multiple invitations to basically be a spiritual sojourner. Again, coming back to the language, Jesus used a very particular word that translates literally one another. So numerous examples. It's just chock full of the narrative of inviting people to love one another, serve one another, encourage one another, build one another up, forgive. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's as if, you know, Jesus was reminding us that we need each other. We need support and encouragement along the way if we're going to awaken and return to that blue sky essence nature beneath the clouds. And we see that similarly in Buddha, in Buddha's teaching. He looked out at the suffering and the agony and the pain that we are caught up in, and out of that he developed the Eightfold Path toward liberation, and invites us to this journey of love and compassion, basically inviting us. You can't, from what I understand in reading and practicing the Eightfold Path, is it is not an individualistic journey. It involves you as an individual, but you in partnership with other spiritual sojourners, community, vitally important. So my way of saying is I re-look at the great spiritual teachers. In fact, I want to say here, I think no enlightened spiritual teacher through the ages would ever want to have supported or encouraged a human institution developing around their movement. That each one of them was inviting us into more of a movement rather than an institution where we tend to get tripped up there again in yet more attachments.
It's an internal movement.
It's an internal movement, and it's a journey. It's as long as we have a human pulse, it's not about a destination or arrival. We are always going to be on the journey together, mutually speaking. It's not that one person's better, or that gets back into the comparison thing. It's so easy, especially in the realm of spirituality, to get head tripped up by the ego again and create one more attachment. So as I relook at the stories, I see in their own unique way these teachers have embodied the same kind of spiritual sojourner invitation that we're having conversation about today. So now let's take a look at our vision. What's your vision for this community, for spiritual sojourners as we move forward together, and as more and more people come into the community, what are your hopes as we move forward together?
I'll go first this time.
Okay.
So one of my hopes of being part of the community, and one of my hopes of sharing with the community, is the idea that going down this spiritual road and asking these questions, it's a practice and it's a journey. And I know we've said that a lot throughout the conversation, but as a yoga teacher and someone who has my own yoga practice, one of the things that I've discovered and continue to keep discovering is that you can know all the facts and the scriptures and the books and everything, but when it comes to the practicality or the implementing in our lives, that it's practice and it's work, and it is an ebb and flow of hitting the mark and then falling, and some days you feel really on top of it and you have all the confidence in the world, and then there's other days where you hit rock bottom and you feel like shit, you look like shit, and that's just
Well put.
what it is that day. And but that's life. It's messy, and nobody promised a straight shot on the map. You're guaranteed to have a million detours, and the great thing about having this community and what I hope to put into it is the idea that all of this is a practice, and it takes practice. And it's, I always compare, when I teach in classes, I always compare a yoga practice to running a marathon or training for a marathon, or like trying to get a six-pack. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a continuation of work and diet and discipline and all of the other things you can possibly think of that go into achieving a six-pack or running 23 miles. It's the same thing, but that's life. And I think if we can create this Sojourner community of support and, being okay with falling and failing and those really shitty days, and being able to have a community to remind you and hopefully build enough stamina in yourself where you can remind yourself that that blue sky exists, that sun is still shining, that we still have that in us. But sometimes you need some support and you need some help to get you there. So I hope to just build normalizing the practice of it, that it's okay to have that ebb and flow. It's okay to have those bad days, and then those, to have grace for those days where it really didn't go like you felt like it should, and then having the humility and gratitude for the days that it does. Being really grateful when things do go as planned, because that doesn't always happen. So
I like that you're bringing up practice, because when we're in the thick of our human conditioning of judging ourselves, judging others, the comparing and competing thing,
so easy.
You're stuck in a head trip. It's all in the mental tapes and the play. And practice, it has a way of getting us out of our head,
right,
and rediscovering the intuitive heart, and deep, profound spiritual wisdom different than knowledge, right?
Yes.
That as we practice and as we implement and condition our lifestyle, and I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, that actually cultivates fertile ground for true wisdom to evolve.
Correct.
That is very different than the judgmental mind trips that we tend to play.
Yeah, someone's telling you you're doing it wrong versus, especially specifically in a yoga practice, you can feel it in your body. Maybe because everybody's different. Every body is different. So the same yoga pose isn't going to look the same in all three of us, and it shouldn't. Just like everybody's life path it's not going to look the same. But getting comfortable enough where you can break that kind of hamster wheel, monkey brain cycle, and have that recognition, because you've been conditioning and practicing your mind, your body, your emotions to recognize, I'm not going down that road. That's just ego. That's just my own mind. Let's reel it back in.
I was going to say, I mean, even with spiritual practice, we get in danger zone when the ego mind kicks in of self-judgment and critique and right?
And it's hard.
You know,
It's work. It's not an easy road to go down, to be this kind of spiritual sojourner where you're challenging your own thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your own nervous system sometimes, trying to combat that, and it's work.
Yeah.
But you know, when you have that group
to support and encourage
you,
along the
cry
way.
with you, laugh with whatever you need, you know.
Yeah. So Sandy, what's your vision? What do you hope to see as this community develops?
So the word that keeps coming up for me as we're talking is the word freedom. As I started going down this path, there's a freedom that comes from the release of the attachments. And the work, so for me, one of the pieces of work is, I'll go back to what you said, is to not run from the gray skies. The gray sky, sometimes suffering, is where the lesson is. And if you can get to a place where you know internally, I'm okay, I'm going to be okay to live through this, and not run from that cloud and look at it. What is it? What is the emotion I'm feeling? I'm feeling this. What is it triggering? I fear I'm worthless. I fear I'm not loved. I fear, and to look at it and say, but am I loved? Oh, I am loved. Okay. And to just walk through, to literally walk through and come through the other side, to see the sun and go, oh, okay. I had an attachment to feeling loved, and I had an attachment to that love looking like my friend was going to call me at 4:00 when she got out of work, and she didn't, and I attached a meaning that she doesn't want to be my friend anymore, and does she have other friends, and this cloud just hangs there, and we have these fears, and that can look like a million different things, and you know what I'm talking about in those moments where someone didn't do what you thought they should do, and expectations and attachment to the way you thought life was going to look. This situation, this year, this job, this relationship, we have all these attachments to the way we think things are supposed to go.
2020.
2020.
Right.
And when
Good old hindsight.
and when we can look at them and walk through and go, okay, I can release that attachment. I am loved. I am okay. And you know what? Not even every relationship does work. Sometimes that friend does go away. Yeah. If we release the attachment to that person, because by the way, they're not ours, they're another soul. And when we're together and it's great, awesome. And when you're not, it's okay. It's okay. Because it's the attachments that cause the suffering. And in those moments of, okay, I had an attachment, I realized it, I still need a good cry, love a community.
Right.
Or I'm celebrating something, and community is wonderful. The other thing I love community for, that I have now learned, is if I'm alone in a room, I can think or feel whatever I want about me. When I'm in the world and I encounter other humans, and it's a problem, or it's a struggle, or there's something that's making me uncomfortable or angry or whatever, it's where I can see in myself where my work is. Because if I have a problem with you, it's not about you. I'm seeing a growth edge from me, and I am challenged to go, am I going to work on that? What is it? What is it about that person that's making me feel this or think this? And how can I work through that? Because they're another loving, wonderful soul. Being them in their journey. They're not trying to upset me or do anything. It's not even about me. Their ego's doing their ego thing.
Right.
As Ron would say, what are you getting so upset about? They're just being themselves. But so that's what I love about communities, because we're the supporters, and we're also the growth in each other. So,
Right.
So to bring that freedom of releasing attachments would be my goal.
Well, and I think part of where I thought you were going there, and I want to see if I'm right, and then it ties in, Brittany, with what you're saying about practice. Is practice helps us embrace the here and now. And good spiritual practice helps us accept and work through whatever's being presented. We may judge this moment as good or bad, pleasure or pain, and by golly, our brain will put all kinds of labels of judgment on this moment.
Loves categories.
Loves categories.
Brain loves categories.
But I think where you were going there is just this radical embrace of being present, of that each moment is a gift, and every awareness is grace. It's a chance to just sort of take, as Eckhart Tolle would say, each moment is purposefully where you need to be. And the question is, well, how do I know this is the moment I'm supposed to have? And the answer is, because this is the moment you're in, right?
Because you're in it.
And so what's the lesson? What's the teaching? Just live into and accept that as a moment of grace.
It's
you know,
hard.
Yeah,
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's
Well,
really
and that's
hard.
that.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's the importance of why we're here today in episode 1, inviting people into a community called Spiritual Sojourners, that is a return to a movement beyond any one entity or institution. And as I look back on my journey, and every kind of like quantum leap, I can look back and see evolutionary moments in my journey, typically moments of pretty intense pain and suffering, by the way. But these were also moments where I was experiencing support and encouragement with fellow sojourners. Not people caught in a head trip, but people genuinely walking hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, mutually, without judgment. And I guess as I think about hopes for the community, one of the things is almost cautionary for me, and that is, I hope that we all can be involved without creating yet another attachment.
Right.
Let me explain. We see this slippery slope unfold in every religious institution since the very beginning, into this shift of rightness. And what happens is, time and time again, we're left with these, what I call these little sectarian tribes of, we're right and we're in, you're wrong and you're out.
Us
and,
versus them.
and right, and that's what I mean by sectarian tribalism. And it all stems back to our attachments. And it's really challenging as we launch and create and invite everyone into journeying with us as a spiritual sojourner, that we're careful not to see this as another belonging attachment. But on the flip side, on the positive, on the hopeful expectation, as we invite people into being spiritual sojourners with us, is that I hope that we're a catalyst for helping one another see our interconnected spiritual oneness amid our beautiful human diversity. We're all beautifully different, but when we go through the portal of the blue sky and remember who we are in our essence nature, we start to see that vision that we are inseparably interconnected as one. And when we live out of that perspective, wow, the difference is we're a non-judgmental community of unconditional love and compassion. Not, I'll love you if you believe what I believe, or I love you if you act a certain way or don't, but it's the Jesus way of seeing. It's the Eastern namaste is, beloved sojourner, I see you and I value you. So as we wrap up, I guess my question for those who are listening in, our audience today, is, hey, Are you ready yet? Are you ready to move beyond the suffering of your clouded separateness? And are you ready to begin walking the liberating path of a spiritual sojourner? If so, I think we all want to be here to welcome you onto the journey. You've had a chance to meet Sandy and Brittany. By the way, guys, these you'll also see them involved in a couple different ways as conversational community moderators. So as people are listening in, those who are interested and want to connect at a deeper level, Brittany, tell us a little bit about how we can get more connected in community.
So we are on the socials. We are on Twitter as Sojourner. Instagram and Facebook, we are at Spiritual Sojourners, and specifically on Facebook, we actually have 2 Facebook pages. One of them is a private discussion group, which anyone can tap into that, and we do pose, or Brian usually poses some questions deep in thought, and we really encourage everyone to just be part of those conversations, ask and pose questions to us, to one another. Myself and Sandy are moderators on that page. Brian also posts weekly oracle cards on the Facebook page, and just different thought-provoking daily questions, daily mantras, as well as the weekly waypoints that come out every Monday. So it's a great place, again, if even you're a silent follower,
Right.
to kind of tap in and, just kind of do that kind of self-check if you don't want to engage with others.
A rich resource to be there, to glean some hopefully timely spiritual wisdom, and more importantly, back to what you were talking about with community, is practice. So, and I think there's other ways people can connect as well.
Yeah, so social is definitely community based. If you do want to reach out to one of us personally, ask some questions, trying to have a more personal conversation, the website is spiritualsojourners.com. There is a contact form that will email us, and we will communicate with you directly and ask any questions. And then if I can shamelessly plug our YouTube channel, if you could subscribe, that would be awesome.
Beautiful. Well, there we have it, folks. As I like to say, the journey towards awakening begins with a single step. So let's get moving. My friends, may you have the courage to begin the journey. We thank you for tuning in today, and we will see you soon for another beautiful conversation, answering some of your palpable, pertinent questions. Again, coming back to community and what Sandy and Brittany just shared, those are beautiful platforms for you to present and share situations, questions that then we can take and bring some spiritual wisdom and practice to not only be helpful for you individually and specifically, but to be a blessing really to the whole community, because there's so many of us encountering, maybe the details are a little bit different and unique, but there's a lot of commonality in the situations we encounter day after day, week after week. So, my friends, we will see you soon for another Sojourners Roundtable. Awakening blessings, beloved Sojourners. Namaste.